Seeing the Nazi masses as a potential bulwark against communism and believing they could control Hitler, a cabal of conservative politicians, including former Chancellor Franz von Papen, convinced President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor on January 30, 1933. The outsider who dreamed of art and slept in Viennese shelters had achieved the highest political office legally. The appointment was merely the start. Hitler wasted no time dismantling German democracy. Within months, the Reichstag fire, February 1933, provided the pretext for the Reichstag Fire Decree, which suspended civil liberties. The Enabling Act, March 1933, passed under intimidation, allowed Hitler to enact laws without parliamentary consent. Within 6 months, all opposition parties and trade unions were banned. Consolidation and purges. The last internal check on his power was the paramilitary SA, whose large, unruly leadership under Ernst Röhm demanded a second revolution. On the night of the Long Knives, June 30, 1934, Hitler purged Röhm and hundreds of other SA leaders and political opponents, consolidating power under the SS, Schutzstaffel, commanded by Heinrich Himmler. When President Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler merged the offices of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer und Reichskanzler, leader and Reichskanzler. The Third Reich was born. Racial law and rearmament. With unchallenged control, the regime began implementing its racial ideology. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped German Jews of their citizenship, prohibited marriage and sexual relations between Jews and non-Jewish Germans, and effectively segregated them from public life. Hitler, meanwhile, ignored the Treaty of Versailles. He implemented massive public works programs like the Autobahn, and crucially, began massive rearmament of the German military, Wehrmacht. The speed of the economic recovery and the reduction of unemployment cemented his popularity among a majority of Germans. Expansion and appeasement. Confident in the West's reluctance to fight, Hitler began his program of territorial expansion. 1936, German troops reoccupied the demilitarized Rhineland. 1938, the Anschluss, or annexation of Austria, was executed with overwhelming popular support in both countries. 1938, he demanded the Sudetenland, a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia. At the Munich Conference, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French Premier Édouard Daladier agreed to the cession, a policy later known as appeasement, hoping to secure peace for our time. 1939, 6 months later, Hitler seized the rest of Czechoslovakia, making it clear his ambitions were limitless. Recognizing the inevitability of conflict, Hitler secured a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union in August 1939, securing his eastern flank. He then turned his gaze back to Poland, demanding the return of territories lost after World War I. The story of Hitler's life now became the story of World War II. At dawn on September 1, 1939, the German army invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. Hitler's strategy, Blitzkrieg, lightning war, was initially devastatingly successful. By mid-1940, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France had fallen, stunning the world. Britain stood alone, successfully resisting the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain. Driven by his ideological obsession with Lebensraum, Hitler made his most fateful decision, the invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, on June 22, 1941. It was the largest military operation in history and marked the beginning of the War of Annihilation in the East. The Holocaust. Simultaneously with the invasion, the machinery of genocide was unleashed. The systematic mass murder of Jews, Romani people, Slavs, political opponents, and others deemed undesirable was underway. Mobile killing squads in the East began mass shootings, and by late 1941, the regime escalated to the final solution, formalized at the Wannsee Conference in January 1942. Specialized extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau and Treblinka were established, designed for industrial-scale murder, primarily using gas chambers. Hitler, through Himmler and his subordinates, was the undisputed architect and driving force behind the Holocaust, the worst crime in human history which claimed the lives of approximately 6 million Jews and millions of others. The war turned. The hubris of the invasion of the Soviet Union proved to be Hitler's undoing. The German advance stalled outside Moscow in the winter of 1941, and the entry of the United States into the war following Pearl Harbor, December 1941, created an insurmountable coalition against him. By late 1942 and early 1943, the tide had irrevocably turned. The decisive defeat at Stalingrad and the subsequent loss of North Africa stripped Germany of its strategic initiative. As the war dragged on, Hitler retreated physically and mentally. He became almost entirely consumed by military affairs, moving his headquarters between various Führer headquarters. His military strategies became increasingly irrational, based on fanatical belief rather than tactical reality, often countermanding his best generals. In July 1944, a group of officers, horrified by the war and the atrocities, attempted to assassinate Hitler with a bomb at his headquarters, the 20 July plot. Hitler survived with minor injuries, interpreting his survival as a sign of divine providence. The failed plot led to a brutal purge and intensified his paranoia, isolating him further within his inner circle. By early 1945, the Soviet armies were closing in on Berlin from the east, and the Western Allies were rapidly advancing after the successful D-Day landings. Hitler retreated into the Führer bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, becoming a ghost directing armies that no longer existed. In his final weeks, he expelled his most trusted lieutenants, including Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler, for perceived betrayal. On the night of April 28, 1945, with Soviet troops only blocks away, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun retreated to his study. They died by suicide, Braun by cyanide, Hitler by a cyanide capsule and a self-inflicted gunshot shot, ending a life that had, in its pathological quest for power and racial purity, consumed a continent and extinguished over 50 million lives. In accordance with his final instructions, their bodies were carried outside, into the Chancellery garden, doused in petrol by his remaining aides, and burned. The fire did not fully consume the remains, but it marked the final, desperate end to the reign of the architect of catastrophe, leaving behind a world shattered by the terror he had unleashed.